Hello. Welcome to session three of 225. And let me get to my page here so we can do some sharing of the screen. So tonight is all about assessment. That is really what the key of tonight is. And especially in the mild moderate world, assessment is really huge. It's a huge part of your job. So looking over the 8 types of assessments that you might see in special education. So one is developmental. So this is looking at the different milestones that a child should go through. So usually with your like IFSPs, your preschools, some of kindergarten, if you are working with them, you may encounter some kind of assessment around the developmental stages and making sure that students have met those. Another one is called screening tests, and these are things that are usually at the school site. So could be like your M class, iReady, STAR testing, even like your BPST, your high frequency word lists. All of those are screeners because you're trying to see if there's any students that kind of fall lower or fall through the cracks. That you can kind of help support, maybe before or during special education. The third one is IQ tests. There is a little bit of discretion needed to be used for IQ, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But IQ testing would only be done for intellectual ability, and that would come from a school psychologist in the school setting. And then the other one is academic achievements, and that is sort of what you guys would be using. So your Woodcock-Johnson, your Wyatt, things of that nature. Those would be the tests that you'd be giving to find out what the academic abilities are in a student. Some other things that you might encounter would be adaptive behavior scales. Most of the time, this is more of your ESN co-partners would be doing a lot of these, but sometimes you may have students that need to look into their adaptability with life skills or motor and other things that might come out. So you might do some rating scales for those, which are different than the sixth one, which is behavior rating scales. So behavior rating scales are also the would be done by the teacher, the parent, and other people who are really familiar with the student. Curriculum-based assessments would be just like what you would have, out of the curriculum in the classroom settings, and then also end of the grade or alternate assessments. So that's going to be like what we call our state assessments here. Um, Going back into this one here. This here is just a great website. Anything that you might need to know about the different types of assessments and when you would use them, especially given in a special education setting. So this is just a great resource for you. But the one that I want to kind of touch on even more would be this page here. Yes, it is out of Minnesota, but it does a really great job, especially for those of you who are just starting out. Maybe you haven't done too many triennials yet, or you want to look at students' triennial to kind of gain some information. And all of these acronyms or all of these tests, and you might not know what they're for, this is a great resource for that. So this really breaks down, again, like in the IQ testing, you're going to either have the WISC or the WJ, you're going to have the C-Tony, you're going to have, all of these. If you see the DAS, all of those would be something that would be done by a school psychologist. And it kind of gives you a little summary about each of them. And then scrolling down, you'd have the Brigance, the Weschler, which is also called the Wyatt, the Woodcock-Johnson, the Peabody. All of those are going to be those, standardized tests that you guys are using. And again, we have talked about others. There's the DASH. There's other things as well. Um, there's also specific to autism, there's a lot of different rating scales that might come out. So the GARs and the CARs are usually two that are pretty well known in our districts and are used a lot. But again, you can just kind of go through here and take a look. There's a lot of the speech and language ones that you might see coming through. And like the castle is a huge one that a lot of our districts use as well. So it just kind of gives you a little bit of information on some of those that if you don't know what it was testing or if you're not quite sure what it was, you can come back to this link here. And that's part of my presentation. You can, bookmark that if you'd like. So, just like thinking about what assessments you guys use in your district for special education eligibility, the majority of you guys have said the Woodcock-Johnson 4 is what you guys are using. And again, that may coincide with what your school psych is also using. They may also be using something different, and that's totally fine. Um, so this here is understanding like the actual bell curve. So you'll probably hear this a lot and it will be referenced a lot. And when we are talking, some of our tests are like 90 to 110. But essentially, if you're literally going through the statistical right of a bell curve, 85 to 115 is considered an average. So this here, that those two columns there, so any standard score that falls between 85 and 115, or for most of our testing, 90 to 110, that is what we call in the average range. High average, low average are different, but right there in the average, that's where majority of our students, general ed or special ed would fall whenever their scores come out. If you have students who, again, kind of moving just a little bit to excuse me, to 90. So if you have like down like 89, all the way down to kind of like 70, we consider that below average. Some of our testing, like the Woodcock-Johnson, would consider 80 to 90 below average, or like low average, they call it. And then there's below average, which would be in your 70s. And then you would have anything that they consider like poor or negligible or anything like that would be kind of anything under that in the 60s and below. And same thing above, so we have like that 110 and above, we have above average, and then we'd have the superior level as well. Um, One of the things that you do need to, give consideration to is that there has been a judgment in a case back in 1993 around Larry P. versus Riles, and that essentially the outcome of that lawsuit is just that the administration of certain IQ testing for students who are African American descent are no longer eligible to be used. Some of it was a cultural difference with some of the things that was being asked. And nonetheless, in our school districts, we now have to use things like adaptive behavior skills and, past records and all of these alternative methods to try to determine if a student is eligible under a specific learning disability without that IQ there. Let me pause here. All right. So, going into that, we are going to be taking a look at what you should consider when you're kind of picking some of the things. So, we are, of course, there's like local, state, federal requirements out of assessments. So some assessments that you might be able to give in certain states won't be able to be used in other states. But really, you want to just think of things that are non-biased. You want to be culturally sensitive. You want to minimize utilize multiple measures so that you're minimizing having to do 7 or 8 different assessments on a student, but that you can kind of just do, one if it could capture more information. And you want to kind of think about all of these different things. Are there things that you need to know about assessing for a student in a different environment? Like, do you need to have that adaptability or the life skills and those kind of things taken in consideration? Social skills and all of that needs to be a part of that discussion whenever you're looking at assessments. And then also just consider the background. Is there a language? Some of our assessments can be done in a home language, and so especially if you have sort of like a newcomer or anybody who is still scoring on that lower end for your English as a second language, you definitely would want to see if there was any of the assessments you could get done in home language. Next thing here is just these are all these 5 different areas that you will find for different kinds of assessments here. So there are formal assessments. So there's all these titles that you're going to hear. A formal assessment is something that is typically like standardized. You're going to score it. You're going to compare students. They are things that can be done for all different ages. And essentially, they could be something that like you're using in a classroom setting. So it could be something like an assessment at the end of a chapter, something that you guys are going to be using to move forward. So it is something that, is a big test, if you will. So a lot of times we have like writing prompts 2 or 3 times a year where we're doing writing testing and things and assessment. So those would be considered like a formal assessment. Yes, we would consider statewide testing formal assessment, but there is a whole different category for that one. But the majority of what you guys are probably going to gain from your students are going to come from those informal assessments. They're like the day-to-day stuff, the things that you see in your classroom all the time, the way that you're noticing your student every single day. So it could be, all of these examples here. Maybe you've got some observations that you want to just jot down, things of that nature. So you've got like checklists or the, rating scales or portfolio things that you have from student work that we've kind of talked about. And that would be sort of like an informal assessment. You could even do this just as like an exit ticket and they do like one little problem for you or something like that. And that was just quick and easy, informally, just kind of gathering some data that you might use to look at goals, to put into your reports. A summative assessment, always think of the word summary. So this is at the end of something. So this is like a culmination of something that is like over time. So this is definitely where we also would see the statewide assessment. Summative is usually something that you can't go back and change. So like once a score comes out, there really isn't going back. So for those of you that are taking your teacher licensure exams or have done that, that is considered a summative assessment. It is you've studied for it, you take it, and there's no going back to change that. SATs, things of that nature, and then also some of our students are in classes where like at the end of a chapter test, there's no going back, or like a unit test, there's no going back. So that would be considered a summative assessment. There's also a formative assessment. So formative is to inform. That's how I always think of it. So it's something that I want to do, that I'm going to collect this data and I'm going to use it to give me information about how my student is doing. So it is maybe like if you have them pulled back to a small group and you have like work for the day, you're kind of taking that back and you're looking at it and assessing, okay, is that student ready to move on? Is it something that we need to reteach again? So it's really used kind of in this informative way to drive your instruction. So that's how you would consider a formative assessment. It can be formal or it can be informal. If it's just a quick on the whiteboard, give me an exit ticket versus like a paper, give me an exit ticket. I'm going to put this in as a grade, or I'm going to use this for any kind of goals. And then there is the statewide assessment. And so that in itself, what we have is called the CASP, the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress. We also have the CAST, which is the California Science Test. Any of your ESN counterparts can also give what's called the California Alternative Assessment, which is called the CAW. But that is somebody who needs to hold that credential in order to give those. So it is kind of unique. It tests on alternative standards, but it is testing kind of mastery of the standards at the same time. But students with cognitive concerns are the students that typically would be eligible to take that. So one thing that we are not able to do while we are, because we're not in class today, is we were going to do a jigsaw activity. And I was going to, have you guys break this up and kind of chunk this activity out. But I think that I will just include this link so that you guys are able to read this. I know that, reading long things, that's why I usually try to chunk things out for you. Reading long things can get, overwhelming, but this is a phenomenal article about learning disabilities and some touch of ADHD, which is a lot of, I would say probably a good chunk of your students on your caseload. This could help benefit if you read about it. So it kind of gives you some research information. It talks about, all the legislations we have in place. And then it kind of goes into areas of process disorder and concerns. And it starts talking about like the needs for eligibility. So really, I would like for you guys to just take a look at reading this. We will, when we come back on night 4, I will open night 4 with us kind of checking in about this. So again, I will not have a formal assignment or anything about this, but please make sure that you do take the time. It is worth the read. It's not terribly long, but so even if you want to chunk it out yourself, in my presentation, you'll be able to see the chunks that I normally chunk out. So if you wanted to, if we were in a group of 4 or if we were in a group of 3, maybe if you want to chunk it out yourself and, do it a little at a time. And then that way it's not overwhelming for you as well. But please be prepared on night 4. We will come back together and have discussion about this assessment for learning disabilities. Okay. Last thing is just taking a look at assignment assessment 5 and 6. So let me get those for you and then I will reshare screen. All right, so here we are, got my page, and now we will share screen again. Okay, so assignment number 5 is developing an assessment plan. Now, I know that you also, most of all of us are using a SACE platform. In that platform, there is an assessment plan. I get that's exactly what you would use to have signature. This is more for like the idea of like the state for your credential to just kind of allow knowledge on how an assessment plan should come about, right? So essentially what you're going to do is you're going to list a student, again, just initials. I don't need full names, or just a first name is fine. What eligibility category they currently have now, what grade that you have for that student. And what you're going to do is you're going to determine sort of what sort of assessments you might use to build for the student that you are going to be testing. Now, so essentially there's only three, lines here. Use more if you need more. But essentially, I just want you to go through and think about your student. What sort of things would you need to see come out for that student? So again, even if it's an annual, but for a try, of course you're going to use standardized testing, but what areas of need do you see for that student? So this was just something I wrote up here. So maybe you have for reading, if we're talking about Johnny's got areas of need in comprehension and fluency. So then I'm thinking about what kind of assessments would I consider? Maybe I'm going to look at like chapter quizzes, right? So like things that they are reading, every day in class, or their independent reading, quizzes, things like that they're taking. Maybe I'm going to take that in consideration. Definitely some kind of standardized assessment, because I'm going to be looking for eligibility. But then also if there's, areas of fluency, I'm going to be looking at words per minute. So I might be doing all these different things, but this could look different for other students, right? Maybe you're worried more about decoding, and comprehension's great. So, what would you actually use that you guys already have access to? And then what would your recommendations be on the assessment plan? Like, justify why you feel like these would be the areas of need for your student. And that, those subsets are what you would use, or whatever. So I just simply put here, I would recommend completing a full assessment with the Woodcock-Johnson that includes class quizzes and student work. And again, that's just based out of, the things that I've already listed. Same thing. So you could go through like math, there's basic math facts and problem solving. So, of course, I'm going to use a standardized, assessment. Maybe I'm going to use math facts, fluency tests, etc. And then explain why. And then if there's an area of behavior here, so you'll have reading, math, and behavior are the big three. If you have other areas that you really want to concentrate on, feel free. This is just generalized, just kind of like looking at, there is sort of like the cookie cutter stamp way that we put our assessment plans together, but your assessment report does not need to just simply be your Woodcock-Johnson standardized scores. There should be sort of a comprehensive report. And most of the time, if you take a look back at reports from a speech pathologist, or reports from a school psychologist, they're going to have, some observations in there, and they're going to have some anecdotal data, and they're going to have some, behavior during the testing. And there's going to be all these different sections, and it's not just about scores. So this is kind of your way of being able to mark your, step your way through and realize what else you might be wanting to add into your overall academic report. Okay, so that is assignment number 5. And assignment number 6 is based off of what I presented to you guys already. So if you go ahead and you take a look at my presentation, you're going to just look at age range or any diversity considerations. So anything that you might need to have there. The majority of them are all going to be sort of all ages. Your statewide assessments essentially might be, like a K to high school kind of situation. You're going to talk about the purpose of the assessment. Why are you giving that? What can you get? What kind of knowledge can you gain out of that? And when is the best practice for utilizing that type of assessment? I did put in the files again in Canvas, samples for you guys for both 5 and 6. If you scroll down in this one, this is where the sample is for sample number 6. So it will be in that files. And so again, you can kind of take a look at this, use what you saw in the presentation tonight, what you guys already know, and that will be for assignment 5 and 6. If you have any other questions that you need answered, try emailing me, and we can set up a quick, time to log in on Zoom and get all of those things answered. Just so that I can also just check in with you guys. Several people had questions on assignment number 4, and I just wanted to kind of reiterate that you're using a student from your own caseload. You are looking at whatever their eligibility factors are, and you're going to be taking a look at the info eligibility page. There's a whole paragraph down there after the eligibility statement that talks about how the disability impacts learning. And so that column you can just kind of cut and paste directly from the IEP. the impact on service delivery is like, how does that look like for the student? Are they, are there special things that you need to do to have them access some of their special services? And then is there any recommendation or change that you would make? So just kind of, reiterating that one for you guys, just because several people had some concerns with assignment number 4. Okay, with that, hoping to see you guys online for night 4 next week, 4:30. Thanks. Have a good night.